until they took a tally of their losses, and they found out that the government had lost 1,500 troops. The soldiers had only lost 30 braves. The government gave that land back to the Indians, and that's pretty much what it did. The Seminole Indians are the only Indians in the United States that have never signed a treaty with our government. This fort up here on the right-hand side, Fort King, that's the exact size replica of the fort that used to stand down in Ocala back in the 1800s. In fact, this area was known as Fort King a long time before it was ever known as Ocala. When the government had the fort, they used it to house their soldiers, and the plan was to rotate those Indians out of the area and use this as a rotation point. When it became very, very evident that that wasn't going to happen, the government pulled their soldiers out, gave it to the city of Ocala. The city of Ocala used the fort as their courthouse and their post office for a number of years until they built buildings that were specially designed to be courthouse and post office. And then they pulled out and gave it to the citizens of Ocala. Well, the citizens of Ocala used it for lumber. They tore it down. They built their houses with it. If you go down in the old part of Ocala today, you'll find buildings down there that are still standing that were built with from that original fort back in the 1800s. A lot of supplies were brought in to satisfy the needs of the soldiers and the settlers. They, of course, used the river because the river was the most efficient way to get it done. They used paddle wheel boats. The paddle wheel boats had to be modified somewhat to get them down the river. And we're going to look at a replica of those paddle wheel boats in just a little bit down the river. They also built a railroad. It was 5 miles long, went from the Silver Springs Riverhead all the way to Ocala, and it was built entirely on wooden rails. We're going to see a replica of that also. Over to your left, you see our turtle diving log over there. Usually there's about 8 or 9 of them on there. The guy at the very top has no choice but to dive in the water because the guys behind him won't back down and let him off the log. So we call it our turtle diving log. If you look off to the front of the boat up on the right-hand side, you'll see a red wooden framework with a tank on top of it. That's the replica of the water tower that serviced the SSO&G Railroad, Silver Springs, Ocala, and Gulf Railroad. Originally, that railroad sat over here where our glass-bottom boats sit right now. Back in the 1800s, there was a hotel there also. If you want to see what it looked like back in the 1800s, we have photographs on the wall on our dock back there. Take a look at them. It'll show you our first glass-bottom boat, the hotel, the railroad, and the whole works. Over here on the left-hand side, you have a replica of the freight boats that were used to go up and down the river. Notice the paddle wheels on the back of the boat. Colonel Hubbard Hart was the owner of the freight lines. He couldn't come up and down the river with the paddle wheels on the back of the boat because the overhang on the Ocala and the Silver Rivers was so dense, he tore the paddles apart coming down the river. So he put the paddles on the back of the boat and he was able to navigate the waters quite well. By so doing, he became the very first stern wheel paddle boat. Stern wheelers have been used out on the Mississippi for years, and they still are for that matter, but they originated right over here on the Ocala. There's a whole log full of turtles up there sunning themselves. As we continue on down the river, you look up on that right-hand side on that bank, you see a whole bunch of buildings. This is what we call a homestead. Took all these buildings to accommodate a family. If you were born on a compound like this, you were raised here, your whole life centered around this area, and probably when you died, you were buried on the same grounds that you were born on. Nobody ever traveled that far away from home back in those days. Not at all like it is today. Our kids grow up, go to college, graduate, and they're scattered off to the four corners of the earth. Or they come home bagging baggage and want to live there again. We won't discuss that. On the right-hand side, that last building down there to the right was the main house. Each house had a purpose, and each house was quite necessary. This house over here was where they met after the evening, and they talked over their day's work. They cooked their meals. They slept here. You might say it was a very, very necessary house. There is one other house that was even more necessary, though. That building to the left of the main house with the half moon in the door. Everybody had one of them. You look up at that main house, you see that split in the middle. That's what we call the breezeway, or the 1800s version of air conditioning. The wind blow through there in the summertime, it would cool it off sufficiently so you could stay cool for maybe a minute or two inside the house. If you look back behind the house, you see another building. That's the kitchen. The reason the kitchen sits back behind the house is because Ma had to cook with a lot of oil and grease over an open flame, and quite regularly she set the kitchen on fire. When she did, if it was attached to the house, Pa had to rebuild the house and all, so he put it back there out of self-defense. And if Ma ever wanted her kitchen remodeled, all she had to do is burn it down. Now, ladies, there's easier ways to get a new kitchen. Don't go home and burn your kitchen down. Life was not easy for the settlers back in those days. They didn't have any of our modern conveniences like electricity, no www.com. And you could search the whole compound and not find a TV set. Can you imagine life without a TV set? Hard to do, isn't it? Be fun to try, but hard to do. You know, they carved out an existence in that primitive land, and because they did, we can do the things that we do today. I go up and down this river all day long without having to ever put that oar in the water. You have no idea how happy that makes me. There's one other thing that makes me real happy when I think about it, how it's evolved over the years, and that's indoor plumbing. I was born and raised in upstate New York, and let me tell you, a trip to the bathroom on a cold winter morning usually meant walking in knee-deep snow before you even got to the bathroom. You did what you had to do and got back in quickly. I don't remember ever taking a book or a magazine out there to read. I did take one book out there, but I left it there. I heard one old fella from the South say, last weekend we carvered into the bathroom. Ma liked it so well that this weekend we went on into the house. These hardline boats were used exclusively to haul freight until the railroad became the more efficient way of doing it. Then they double-decked these things, put sleeping quarters on them, and hauled people. You could come down from Jacksonville to Silver Springs on an overnight cruise. It would cost you the grand sum total of $5. Round trip. Of course, the weekend was a little bit more expensive. You paid $5.10. 10 cents covered the brunch they served you on Sunday morning, which consisted of very fresh food. Whatever they shot on the bank and dragged aboard the boat, that was your brunch. This box over here on the tree, that's a wood duck hut. You'll see a couple of them nailed up to the tree down the river. We put those up there to preserve the life of our wood ducks, because before we put them up there, the gators ate them as fast as they could hatch. And over here on the right-hand side is our turtle diving log. Guys get on the top of there and they let the algae bake off the top of their shells, and when they dive back in the water, it all washes away. See their legs all every which way? The sun bake off all the parasites that develop under their shells. You might say they're literally getting a sun bath. Up here on the left-hand side, look at our Fort King from the backside. They told me when I first started here that the very first Indians in this territory were Paleo Indians. Now, I had heard of Mohawk, Comanche, Sioux, Apache, Iroquois. I'd even heard of Seminoles, but I had never heard of a Paleo-Indian. I looked it up in the dictionary. I found out that paleo means old. So we had some old Indians here. Wasn't that exciting? Didn't thrill me much either, but it did solve a problem for me. I couldn't figure out why on earth anyone in their right mind would put a ladder on the outside of the fort. I know now they did it for the old Indians. See, those old Indians couldn't get over that wall. The braves could scale the wall real quick, but the old Indians needed some help. Hey, wasn't that nice of those people?